So, nau mai haere mai, kia korua. Tēnei te mihi mai oha, kia korua. Welcome, Whiti and Jack. It's great to have you here this evening. Ngā mihi tātou katoa to our audience. Kia ora, thank you for coming along to celebrate with this panel discussion the publication of Hiwa, Contemporary Māori Short Stories. And it's been published by Auckland University Press and edited by the amazing Paula Morris with the consulting editor, the very inspirational Darryn Joseph. So I also want to acknowledge Jackie Sturm. This is her picture here. She was the first Māori writer to appear in a New Zealand literary anthology, and she also used to work for Wellington City Libraries. So, and she is the author that Hiwa is dedicated to. So we just want to acknowledge her, and also I just want to acknowledge Emily Lolo Aholele Sione, who died this week, who was a writer, a Tongan New Zealand writer. So ngā mihi ki ngā hunga mate to Jackie and all of our tupuna who have laid the path for us. So ngā mihi. So I just wanted to start, before we get into a bit more, I just wanted to read a little bit from the introduction to Hiwa that Paula Morris wrote about why it's called Hiwa, because I think it's actually quite meaningful. So Hiwa is one of the stars in the Matariki cluster, and it's one of the most sacred of the group. And Rangi Mātamua has said that Hiwa deals with the deepest desires of the heart, and then he has quoted a karakia, and it's always nice to have a karakia before you start something. So it's not really a formal karakia, but we'll just read it out. Taka taka te kāhui o te rangi, koia a pau tō pūtanga ki te whai ao, ki te ao marama. Let the stars fall from the sky, my wishes, and be realised in this world, the world of light. So it's really lovely, the name Hiwa, for the puka puka. Okay. So in the Aotearoa New Zealand Review of Books, Hiwa has been described by Deborah Walker-Morrison as a celebration of the sheer talent of Māori writers, embodying and expressing the diversity of Māori identity and experience in the 21st century. So we're very lucky to have two of the contributing kaituhi authors here with us this evening. So, Whiti Hereaka, kia ora. Whiti is a multi-award winning author of wonderful books such as The Graphologist's Apprentice, I always get this wrong. Yeah, Kura Ngai Tuku, Kārawi ka pai kia ora, which is a very edgy, great book. Everyone should read it. And then my personal favourite, Legacy, which is a really great book. So Whiti is also an award-winning playwright and screenwriter, barrister and solicitor. She holds a master's in creative writing from the International Institute of Modern Letters, Victoria University, and she's a trustee of the Māori Literature Trust. And we were just saying beforehand, it's not till someone reads out all the things that you've done and you've achieved that you realise how awesome you are. Kia ora. So nau mai ki a koe e te uri o Ngāti Tūwharetoa, te Aroha, Tūhaurangi, Ngāti Whakaue, Ngāti Tūmata Wea, Tainui me Ngāti Pākehā. Got to get all those affiliations in there so we don't leave anyone else. So welcome, Whiti. Kia ora. Kia ora. Now, I hope I'm going to get your name right, Jack. Is it Jack Remiel? Is that how you say it? Jack Remiel Cottrell. So Jack is also an award-winning author who won the Wallace Foundation Prize for the manuscript of his first book, 10 Acceptable Acts of Arson, and other very short stories. And Jack was just telling me that schools are using it in their syllabus. So that's pretty amazing. I think you've made it when schools start using your books. And Jack is a graduate of the Master of Creative Writing program at the University of Auckland and has been published in multiple anthologies such as Ko Aotearoa Tātou, which is this one. It's amazing. I recommend it. And he's also been published in The Listener and Tākahe. And if you check out Jack's website, which I recommend you doing, you will see that he is a writer who writes very short stories to make up for having a very long name. So, nau mai ki a koe e te uri o Ngati Rangi. Welcome to Jack Remiel Cottrell. Ka pai. And I'm Louise Dowdle. I'm lucky enough to be one of the librarians here in the West Cluster of Wellington City Libraries. And I feel really privileged to be here this evening with both of you. Ka pai. Let's get into our first pātai for our kaituhi. So with Hiwa, it's a really amazing book with amazing collection of authors, and the introduction is really, I really recommend reading it because Paula Morris sets out really succinctly how she, what she wanted to get from the book. But what I wanted to know was, what does it mean to you as authors to be included in an anthology like this? Who wants to go first?
I'm holding the mic, so I guess I have to. It was Jack's evil plan to get me to hold the mic. Kia ora, everyone. Thank you for coming along. Oh, it's so hard to kind of articulate because it's so lovely to be included in a group of such talented writers, Jack amongst them. So yeah, it's great. And then sometimes the old imposter syndrome's like, ooh, why am I included with all these flash people? But yeah, I think it's lovely to be in a book, particularly one that's celebrating contemporary stories.
Yeah, because everybody that's contributed to the book is still living. So yeah, it's very very contemporary.
I think for me, not only being included with someone like Whiti, whose entire accolades about twice as long as my bio, but
You've got a long time. You've got lots to go.
But also as someone with my complexion, being included in a book of contemporary Māori short stories, it actually feels like finally getting a bit welcomed and beyond my family, my whānau, my iwi, who would, fight people, but there's still a lot of interesting takes on what Māori writing is.
Yeah, I think that's one of the things, and one of the questions I've got is, what does it mean to you to be a Māori author, and what is Māori writing, if there is such a thing as Māori writing? And I know that in the introduction to Hiwa, Paula Morris talks about not having any specific kaupapa for the book. That's right, isn't it? She didn't give you any kind of, it has to be a Māori piece of writing, and I think that it shows the diversity. So, what does it mean to you to be seen as a Māori writer, or to, what is Māori literature?
Yeah, I mean, I've spoken with my mum about this at great length, and we just kind of came up with, it's a vibe. A lot of it is to do with the kind of humour that's in the writing, and it's certainly not anything to do with the setting. There's this idea that it has to be set in Aotearoa, which kind of makes me struggle because I want to send Māori robots to space.
Yeah.
And so it should be kind of everything, but also just like an intangible, I guess.
Kia ora.
Kia ora. Yeah, I agree with that. So I've worked with emerging Māori writers through Te Papa Tupu program, and invariably someone will say, I'm not Māori enough. The thing I'm writing isn't Māori enough. And we'll have a big discussion about what that means. So usually I say, you are, obviously, you are, don't truck any of that blood quantum nonsense in this whare, thank you very much. But also I think we bring a te ao Māori lens to whatever we're writing. So robots in space, there'll be a te ao Māori way of looking at that. And to sort of answer your first part of the question, like what it means to be a Māori writer, I don't know what it means not to be a Māori writer.
Exactly,
it's kind of like, what is it like not to breathe or not to be alive? I don't know. Well, I know what it's like not to breathe because I can hold my breath, obviously. But so I can't separate being Māori from being a writer. I can't separate being a writer from being Māori. They're intertwined, like hopefully most of my identity. So, yeah, I think you can write about anything, but you'll be bringing, I think as we all do, you bring your culture with you, the certain way of seeing things with you.
Yeah, that's right. It's like anything you do in the world, you're doing it through a Māori lens because you are Māori. So, yeah. Kia ora. That's beautiful. So, how did you go about choosing? Did you get to choose the story that you contributed to the anthology, and how did you go about choosing the book, the story that you contributed?
I had published Cicada in a little, I guess, handout that they give to school kids at Auckland Writers Fest in 2019, and I really liked the story, and I was like, I want a bigger audience to read it, particularly because it kind of goes into a creepy horror-esque thing, which I'm sliding into with my novel writing anyway. So yeah, that's why I chose Cicada. I wanted, to pull it out of the little collectible thing that not many people have and put it into this collection. And yeah, I'm interested when I'm writing short stories and playing with form, and that story in particular plays with form quite a bit.
Awesome. I'm so glad you did. It's great. What about you, Jack?
Well, I submitted 3 stories for the anthology. My stories are very short.
It's one of my questions. After this one, I'll ask the next
Well,
one. About what is flash fiction and microfiction?
And going back to your last question, actually, I submitted the 3 most Māori stories that I could, and Paula came back to me going, well, I like these 2, but the third one's a bit and I was like, the third one is a bit So I sent her a story about artificial limbs being repossessed, and her response was, well, it's not the most intellectual thing I've read. But I've just been going through a whole bunch of stories that are like traumatic, and it was nice to laugh. And so that's where that one came in. It's called Bricked. But yeah, so I just kind of went, first I tried to play to being a stereotype, and then I was like, well, actually, I'm just going to, send my weird stuff in anyway.
But I love that, because I think that ties back to what we were saying before, that go for it with your weird stuff, because you don't have to play into that stereotype of nanny down by the beach with the mokopuna calling to the whales kind of thing. There's a lot more depth to our lived experience. as
Uncle Whiti's going to come slap you.
No. Well, it's for me it was really exciting to read your stories and to relate to them as well. The one that I particularly liked was the reasons for avoiding going to the mihi whakatau, because I think we've all been there and felt like that. So yeah. And so, do you want to tell us what is flash fiction and what is microfiction, and how does that what's appealing about that form for you?
Well, there are ongoing fights about what the form, where the boundaries of the form is, but flash fiction is generally a story of fewer than 1,000 words, which I think is gratuitously excessive. I tend to write stories of under 500 words. Microfiction, I've always assumed, is a story that you can fit into a tweet. Or whatever it is now. But I've also been told that, microfiction goes up to 500 words, in which case I'm only writing microfiction. And what appeals to me about it is I really love words. And if I can get through the whole writing process and get to the good bit of playing with every single one of those words and making them do all the things I want to do, and then kind of putting in layers of stuff, that really appeals to me. And also I have a very short attention span, so novels, they're all right.
I love that economy, the simplicity of trying to make every word count, and the sound of it as well. When I was reading your ones, I was kind of reading them out loud to myself because I really love the way that they sound. So yeah.
I actually want to say, how brave it is to write microfiction. I mean, that sounds like so brave, but you have nothing to hide behind.
Yeah.
Every word does count. You have to think about each word and how you're placing it and make it count that way. Whereas, I can waffle on for several thousand words and hide behind a big, long metaphor that I've stretched out of shape. So, yeah, kia ora.
So, Whiti, would you like to read some of Cicada?
Sure.
Thank you.
Here's something I prepared earlier. So I'm reading a part of Cicada, about halfway through. I don't think you need to know much about it. Maybe you do. So it's a story that has 3 strands through it. There is an older voice, a younger voice, and some facts about cicadas. That's probably all you need to know to set this up. The camera I got for my birthday in 1989 was a 110, the generic name for cameras that took 110 film cartridges. Things came in cartridges back then: film, music, and the games we played on the Atari. The idea of the cartridge was to make loading the film easier. No more double exposures from poorly wound film. I still managed it. At least half of the photos from my first roll were blurred and doubled, ghosts occupying the same frame as people. Perhaps I didn't wind it fully, or perhaps I wound it too far. Or perhaps I did it on purpose. I can't remember. I do remember my parents being upset that I wasted the film. There was one particular photo I remember, a self-portrait that I took in my bedroom mirror. I've tried to find it, but it's lost. I want to remember that moment, to look into my eyes and capture that feeling again of being young, confident enough to take my own photo. When I think of that photo now, I'm no longer in my body. Instead, it's like I'm looking at myself through the window. I can only see myself in reflection. Adult cicadas only live for 2 to 3 weeks in summer. In that time, they must mate and lay their eggs. As the winter cools, they'll die off. I was looking in the mirror, and behind me was a face in the window, a woman, older than Mum, younger than Nana. She looked familiar. And then I remembered that the windows are too high for her to be standing there. Dad has to use a ladder to clean those windows. I was scared. It felt like one of those dreams when you can't move your legs. I wanted to call out, let someone else see her too. But I knew she'd be gone if I did. They always disappear. Mum says I have a vivid imagination. She never sees half the things I do: weird things, scary things, whispering things. I don't know why they seek me out, but they do. I had my camera, so I took a photo in the mirror, me and the woman. Once the film is developed, I'll have proof. Mum thinks I'm lazy because I leave all my clothes on the bed, but it's protection so they can't find me. Sometimes they find me anyway in my dreams. I wake up with their heaviness upon me, and I can't move, and it's hard to breathe. And they whisper to me. Cicadas cut open a thin branch on a tree or a bush and lay their eggs inside in a herringbone pattern. Each egg is the size of a grain of rice. I met with a friend I haven't seen in a while. I thought if I listened to her stories, my own would flow again, break me out of my rut. I told her I hadn't been sleeping. She lectured me about supplements to take. I forgot about her voice. There's something in her timbre that's enthralling, irritating, like the zzz pulse of cicada song. It made my ears ring. The sound vibrated down the base of my skull, down my spine. When I felt the sharp pain in my scar again, I made an excuse to leave. She didn't want me to go. She's worried that I'm becoming isolated, turning in on yourself. I said I'll call her tomorrow, next week, sometime. The pain made it hard to see. Darkness crowded my peripheral vision, even in the bright sunlight. It was worse when I left the cafe. Every tree was alive with them, cicadas. I looked at my back in the mirror. The pain radiated from the old scar between my shoulder blades. The scar is like a zip, a procession of lowercase V's keyed down my spine. It looked inflamed. Or was that the heat? The cicada larvae burrow underground. They feed off the sap of plant roots to grow strong. This can take years. Some species of cicada in America spend 17 years underground. Nightmares again? I woke up crying, and when I looked over at Kater, she was sitting up in bed staring at me. She looked scared. Kater said I was making strange sounds in my sleep. She let me sleep in her bed. She held me close, and I could hear her heartbeat. Dad will want to hear about my dream tomorrow. He doesn't listen to anything else I say, but he does listen to my dreams. He says that it's important to listen to dreams. They're messages from somewhere else. I dreamt about the woman in the window, except I wasn't looking at her, I was looking through her. I was her. I looked at my back in the mirror, twisting my head to see. It hurt to look. Her back, my back, was bruised. The bruises looked like wings underneath my skin. In between the bruises was a scar. I thought I saw something moving underneath it. I tried to scream, but the only sound that came out was zzzt, zzzt, zzzt. I felt dizzy and my eyes went funny. When I opened my eyes, I was back in my room, back in my body, Kater staring at me.
Kia ora. So beautiful. What I really liked about both of your writings and Hiwa is the familiarity of the settings. So we've all heard the cicadas, in the summertime and the sound of them, and I'm sure that as kids, probably lots of us went around collecting the shells of the bodies.
As kids?
Yeah, as adults. And also things like being, going to a mihi whakatau or being at, we don't call it social welfare anymore, but, wins or, like waiting and those kind of places. And so I love that familiarity, but the way that you've also both injected the supernatural or gallows humour into the writing, which I think gives it that real edge and energy and excitement. Why do you think it, what is the role of the sinister in your writing, or the role of the supernatural?
I'm not sure I've written anything that isn't like that. I found a genre which was briefly popular in the late 80s and early 90s called slipstream, which is defined as essentially the weirdness that was life at the end of the 20th century. And I'm like, oh my goodness, there's a word for it. And I was really lucky. My book came out during, it was at the start of the second lockdown. It wasn't that lucky because my book was in stores and no one else was, but it meant that everyone else suddenly was occupying this world that I felt like I lived in. Everyone else is like, this is unprecedented times. And I'm like, really? What have you been paying attention to? So that's basically my vibe.
Oh,
yeah.
I love it. I think that there's a really strong thread that runs through, Māori oral stories and I don't know, waiata songs, whakapapa, that supernatural intertwined with the everyday life that I think gives that real richness and depth.
Yeah, so I'm working on my next novel. Plug. No, it's going to be years away. Don't look out for it yet. And as part of that, I'm doing my PhD. So I was having a meeting with my supervisor, Robert Sullivan, and he was asking me, what kind of story is it that you're writing? And I was like, supernatural thriller. It's going to be a ghost story. And he said, so just a normal everyday story then. Because, ghosts and the supernatural are just part of every day. Yeah. I used to have big thoughts about the idea of magical realism. That's a very Western way of looking at that genre of work. Like magical realism here, that's just how we see the world. Again, it's the Te Ao Māori lens. I can't speak for the peoples of South America, but because there's such a lot of magical realism that's coming out of that continent, maybe that's just realism. Yeah, that's how those people see the world. So that's one of my soapbox.
Nice, I like it.
So we'll move on from that.
Oh no, that's great. Thank you. Jack, would you like to have a read from yours?
I think I will go for something deeply odd. This is Work and Income Gothic. Now, I wrote this while waiting for an appointment with my WINS caseworker so I can confirm its complete and total veracity. You approach the door. In place of a security guard, there is a sphinx. She asks you a riddle. You answer it correctly, but she pretends she cannot hear you. The receptionist asks for your name. She asks for your client number. She asks for your most painful childhood memory. She asks for a sliver of your soul. You wait. Your name will be called. Hours pass. Days. Years. When they call your name, you no longer recognize it. In the waiting area, you see a man drinking a beer. You see a man drinking a can of Woodstock. You see a man drinking the blood of the damned. He has very clean fingernails. A poster states, the only disability is a bad attitude. A man using a wheelchair touches the poster. Immediately, he levitates out of his chair, then begins to glow with a pulsing white light. Your caseworker asks if you are in a relationship. You start to say no. Before you can, you are in a relationship. You are the bride of an eldritch monstrosity whose name cannot be uttered by the human mouth. A bell rings. A column of flame erupts and engulfs the person next to you. The staff applaud in unison. You sign a form stating you understand your rights. You sign a form stating you understand your responsibilities. You sign a form stating you understand how the universe will destroy itself. And then you do understand. You begin to scream.
I love that. It's just so great. It captures that kind of vulnerability, alienation, and incandescent kind of almost rage that you feel when you're somewhere like that.
When my caseworker was 45 minutes late and I didn't bring my phone charger.
Oh, yeah, exactly. Oh, thank you. That's, yeah. And I think that that form really lends itself to reading aloud. It's just, it sounds so great. And I have to thank you for introducing me to a new word. I had to look up what eldritch meant. That's a great word. Does everyone know what it means, or was I the only ignorant person reading the book? What does it mean, Jack?
Very, very strange and possibly indescribable. I think Lovecraft coined it. So, almost anything in his stories was eldritch, including his own view on race relations.
Do you want to elaborate? No, you don't have to.
I will not be elaborating at this time.
Oh, thank you so much. I think that with Hiwa, there's so many amazing writers that are in it. Do you have, is there anyone that's inspired you to write or to create or been a specific, like there's only the two of them, so they just have to.
Jack?
That's inspired you to write or create. I know that I was reading somewhere that Kerry Hume's The Cicadas of Summer had influenced you is that right?
Not really, but I'll accept it, yes.
Oh,
Yes, why not?
And I really liked it in the Cicada story where you talk about a famous writer came to class today,
Yeah.
and it brought back to me all the famous writers that would come to high school in the 80s. I was really lucky. Lots of people came, like Hone Tūwhare, which was really amazing. But I remember when Hone Tūwhare came, feeling just so nervous of not being able to talk to him because he was so amazing. And I loved the way you talked about that in the story.
I'm trying to remember who came to class, because a famous writer did come to class today. Might have been Joy Cowley.
Oh.
I think it might have been Joy Cowley. Yeah, and her advice, because I said I have too many thoughts and I can't get them out, and her advice was to learn to type, and I'm still a terrible typist. So I did listen to it, I just didn't follow through. So writers that have inspired me.
Yes, yeah.
In general, or particularly in the collection?
Well, in the collection, because one of the things I was going, in general, because then I'm going to follow up with a question.
Oh no, follow-up questions?
Yeah, a follow-up question. So I'll save that as a surprise, and just ask, writers in general, who do you look to for inspiration? Yeah,
well, I've been really, really lucky in that I've worked with a bunch of writers, particularly when I was like a baby writer. So Renee in particular helped me write The Graphologist's Apprentice. She was my mentor for the first draft of that, and then I was really lucky to work with Phil Mann for the second draft of that, so very spoilt. Whiti, of course, have a great working relationship with him. But also from Hiwa, David Geary. So David is also a playwright, and I was in a workshop of his 15, 16, 20 years ago. And I really love his stories, the way he approaches stories. They're funny too, which is I really love about it. Yeah, so probably David in the collection, and more, but I can't think of anyone offhand. Jack is an inspiration to me.
What about you, Jack? Who's someone that's inspired you in the general world?
In the general world, I mean, I write weird fiction, and I'm going to be a complete cliche and say Neil Gaiman, because sometimes cliches are because they're important and they're right, and he's amazing. Yeah, I mean, I was mentioning this to you earlier, but I think I grew up in Karori, and one of the kind of formative parts of my childhood was being allowed to take out the Sandman graphic novels from the Karori Library, even though they were in the adult graphic novels section, and I was about 10. I'm
go Karori Library.
Normal. So the librarians in Karori have definitely, contributed to my growth as a writer. In the collection, other than Paula Morris, who was my master's supervisor and bullied me, and I would not have a book if she hadn't, not taken it upon herself to poke, prod, degrade, just all of it. And also Shelley Burnfield, who was in my master's class and who was an exceptionally good sport about everything, especially as I was the most horrible person.
Oh, no.
But no, she is great, and you should read her stories. They're exceptionally good.
Yeah. She writes, I was saying to some of the staff here, when we thought she was going to be part of the lineup for tonight, and we were really excited, she writes really great articles in their tangata that I find very inspiring. So, follow that up, whānau. And so, if there was one story in the, well, maybe you've covered that because you said David Geary, and Paula Morris. She's amazing. I couldn't believe when I had an email in my box this morning from Paula Morris. I was so excited because she's such a legend in the New Zealand literary scene.
Soon you'll learn to be afraid.
Right. We'll have to block her.
The Eldritch horror.
The Eldritch horror. No, surely
She'd
not.
be so flattered to be described like that.
All the secrets are coming out. So because you've both are graduates of creative writing programs, we're going to go to the serious questions now. What do you see as the value of creative writing programs? I know that in the past a lot of our writers traditionally in New Zealand, wouldn't have had that kind of almost academic support system. What does it mean for you doing those courses?
For me, one of the really significant things that I got from it was access to student allowance and study-linked housing support. It's very rare that you get a year of being paid to write. And I mean, the fact that I was having deadlines, discussing with other writers about things, even if they were terribly wrong, and just being able to spend the time and be forced to produce something that was the biggest thing. It feels like the academic bit is almost secondary to the fact that you just get to take a bunch of time and the government will fund it. Technically.
Nice. What about you, Whiti?
Well, yeah, it's been many years since I was in my master's. But yeah, now I teach, so I'm on the other side of it. So the academic side is no, I'm just kidding.
It's very important.
It's very important. But no, it is the time. And for me, when I'm working with students, supervising them and trying to get their work into the world, seeing that growth as a person, as a writer is just amazing. Like Jack said, it's a year that you get to focus on your work, which I guess in the real world it's difficult to do that. And you're in a room with other writers, and you can have really boring writing discussions that non-writers will be like, oh my god, arguing about commas again.
Oxford comma.
So yeah, you can be in a room with people, and you can see, as a teacher, you can see the level of people's writing just go what, like that, because you have 10, 12 minds all thinking about your story, and then you think about other people's story. I think that's the most valuable thing as well. It's not just that people look at your story, but you have to look at their stories. And in doing that, you learn so much about how you write as well. Whenever I give comments and feedback to people, I know that the things that I pick up on are the things I do myself. But I can see them in other people's work, and I don't necessarily see them in my own work. So I think that's valuable too. It gives you the tools to be able to critique your own work as well.
I love that. That's great. So, kind of following on from that, is it hard to make a living as a writer? And how do you survive?
Do you want the actual answer?
Yes, of course.
It's bloody hard to make a living as a writer. I think it's almost impossible. I was a full-time writer for a good 5 years before I got the job at Massey, and I spent a lot of that time just chasing work, not actually writing. So yeah, that's
Did you find
difficult.
it isolating when you were, like as a full-time writer? Was that something? Because I wonder sometimes that about writers that are full-time writers, and maybe they're introverts and they love that time on their own. And Jack, what do you? Is that something you can relate to?
I don't know if I'm ever really fully alone. I've got characters in here going on the whole bloody time.
Yeah.
But yes, you do need to kind of go out and as the youth would say, touch grass. Yeah.
What about you, Jack? Is it, because I noticed on your website and on your LinkedIn that you do lots of other things. How is it finding time for the writing and the creativity?
Really, really difficult. I spent 1 year as a full-time writer, which I was only able to manage by moving to my family batch outside of Turangi and touching a lot of grass and seeing very few people. And I had a very, very trimmed down lifestyle, which is the only way I could afford to survive, and I was still running through all of my savings. So I work doing online content, I make people's websites, I do...
Hear that, whānau? Get out there if you want somebody.
Please just jackremiel.co.nz, you can get in touch with me. I would say it's actually impossible to... Particularly, actually, unless you have a very well-off spouse, it is impossible to be really making a living as a full-time writer unless you're also just wildly successful. Often you need both.
Yeah. That would be convenient. Both.
Sugar daddies, you've got my website.
And also carrying on from that, one of the things that interested me was how... Honestly, you hear it all in libraries and you become very used to just, and following on from that, moving on. When you win an award, so like the Wallace Prize or the Ockham's or something.
All of the ones that he's won.
No, but does that help with raising your profile, and does that make a difference to getting published, getting your name out there, and how important is it to have those prizes? It's like having these anthologies. How important is it to have those literary prizes?
Well, the people who are giving out money are very interested in those things. Creative New Zealand wants you to have recognition, and people who pay you to go and speak at festivals and, do things also want you to have that recognition. BT Dubs, we're not being paid to be here. That usually they want you to sound fancy, so Whiti's made, but it is important, but probably less so for the whole being a writery thing than it is for having other people see that you can word okay.
Yeah. Nice.
Yeah, I think it is important, like Jack said, to access some of the grants you can get. Events like this, people won't come along if they don't know who you are, and awards help with that. Monetarily, yes, in the moment, I guess, they're great. Obviously, I won the biggest prize last year for literature, yay! Which was great, and I'm not complaining about that, not at all. But if I broke it down over the many years that I spent writing that book,
Cost benefit ratio.
Yeah, just don't do it. If you're a writer, don't think about how long it's taken and how much, how many cents per hour you would need. Anyway, but yeah, it does help. But yeah, in the actual writing itself, I'm not writing things with the idea of winning a prize. It's great if it happens. I'm usually like shell-shocked if it happens, but yeah, it's great if it happens. I'm really writing it for the story, like for the story to be the best it can be. But it's lovely to get accolades. Please send more money this way.
Kia ora. So I'm just conscious that we're coming up to question time, so I just want to tie it back to the writing, because I think that I loved the way that Paula Morris discussed short stories in the introduction to Hiwa, and there's a great quote that I wrote down because I really loved the way she talked about it. Just let me find it. Short stories are the wily messengers of fiction, shooting potent darts around the universe and through the centuries. So if we're tying it back, what is it about short stories that you think appeals to people? You know, why do we love short stories? Why do we return to them? Chekhov, Catherine Mansfield. I won't go all the ones that I had to read that were English and American writers when I was at high school. So Jack, I wish I'd had your book when I was studying at high school. What is it about short stories that we love?
What I love about short stories is that you can have a short story that evokes a feeling rather than being really plot forward. I mean, you can have short stories that are plot and narrative forward, yes. But yeah, it can be a feeling, it can be an impression of something. It's also what you were talking about earlier about the everyday. A lot of short stories are observing the everyday. Slice of life, but also, highlighting that in the everyday there is beauty, that you don't need, to go to exotic places to find beautiful things. They're in your own backyard too. And also, if you don't have a huge attention span, dip into a short story and then find another one. Great thing about anthologies that I love is that, you can find something to suit your mood for that day.
Yeah, I think they're a real treasure trove, an anthology, because, like you say, you can just, it's one of those, an anthology is a great book because you can flick it open and where's it going to take you? Yeah.
I mean, I think short stories, in particular the shorter you go, the more interesting stuff you get to do with them. Like, I could not have carried any of the 3 stories that in the anthology over 1,000 words, let alone 50,000. So you get to just play with them and make them into other things, and then the story at the same time. So they're just the most fun to have with literature, as far as I'm concerned.
I love that. Thank you. Kia ora. I was just saying, I'm really sad we have to bring a close to this evening because it's just so lovely talking to you, and I could just keep listening, and I'm sure we'd find lots more things to talk about. So come back anytime to Te Mahanga, Karori Library.
It's such a long walk.
No excuses. Now we know where you are.
I live a minute and a half away.
Yes. So, ngā mihi kia kōrua, thank you so much for coming and, sharing your whakaaro and your writing tips and all the other glorious things you've shared with us. I want to say thank you to Auckland University Press for arranging for you to come and for publishing such a beautiful book. For those of you that haven't had a look at it yet, even, when we were talking about the form of writing, the form of this book is really beautiful. And I really like the way it gives added weight to the information about the author as well as their writing. It's kind of acknowledging the author as well as the story that they've given. So, yeah, it's a beautiful book. And ngā mihi to Marsden Books. And Brian is here this evening with some books. So thank you for coming along. Local books, independent bookseller. Yay! And thank you to Neil Johnston, who is our Wellington City Library's fiction specialist, who puts all these amazing events together for us and comes along and supports us. So kia ora. Thank you for letting us have this at Karori Library.
Yay!
And thank you to the amazing staff at Karori Library for moving all the chairs, getting the food ready, listening to me getting stressed. So, yeah, they're amazing. And if you don't live in Karori, go and support your local library branch because they're amazing. And go out and either borrow Hiwa or one of these other amazing books that these writers have written, or go and buy them. You'll have a lot of great reading in store. So, ngā mihi kia koutou, Paul Māori. The authors are going to be here to sign books and have a little kōrero, and then we'll be closing the library doors at 7:20 so that the staff can go home and have a rest. Okay, kia ora.